Hello, and welcome to the Scale Toolkit series by Global Schools Forum. My name is Julie Bélanger, and I am a director at Better Purpose. We've been supporting Global Schools Forum as part of the Impact at Scale Lab program. Now, our mission with the Scale Toolkit series is to empower early stage educational organizations in low and middle income countries, providing them with some of the tools and best practices they need to scale effectively. We are sharing our learnings from the Impact at Scale Lab program in doing so. So today we'll be diving into the theory of change. Now, this is a tool designed to strengthen the desirability portion of your solution as part of the DVF framework. For those unfamiliar, DVF stands for desirability, viability, and feasibility. And the DVF framework is really central to this approach. It outlines the fundamental components that can indicate your organization is getting prepared for scale. So if you haven't yet undertaken the DVF assessment, we highly recommend doing so because it can help you reflect on your priorities and understand how this specific tool aligns with your overall journey to scale. You can easily find it in the Scale Toolkit website. But for now, let's dive into the theory of change. So we all want to create change, right? A theory of change is a tool that really helps you believe that change can be made to happen and outlines how it will happen. What are the main elements for that change to happen? It helps us understand our goals and really plan the actions we need to take to get there. It's a tool that can help us communicate our change and evaluate our impact later down the line. So this presentation is to guide your development of a theory of change step by step. So, a theory of change can be really helpful in many different ways. It can help with strategic planning. At the beginning of your program, when you're starting to develop it, you need to set some clear objectives for your strategies. It can help with fundraising and grant applications because donors and supporters are probably going to ask for one and ask you to explain how you think your program, your innovation will bring about the change that you are hoping to achieve. Then it also helps with stakeholder communication. You can talk to people about the work that you're doing, about your program, and it really, really helps, usually as visual even, to share and provide a narrative tool to convey the impact journey that you're on. And finally, it's really the basis for reviewing and reflecting periodically on the progress that you're making with your innovation or with your program towards that impact objective that you have. Now, a theory of change can look in many different ways. This is just one example, and this illustrates the different components that you usually will find in a theory of change. Now, whether you're doing one for your whole organization or a specific program or project within your organization, you're going to need to think about different components. So working through each one of these will really help you understand how your key activities will contribute towards the ultimate goals that you're trying to tackle at the end of the day. So these are the different components. Let's go through them one by one. So the first step is to think about your problem statement. So that's at the beginning of your theory of change. Now, the problem statement, one way of helping you figure out what that is to do a problem tree exercise. And there is another video going through that particular toolkit as well. So if you've done your problem tree exercise, you already know what your problem statement is, and you can just input it into this box for the beginning of your theory of change. So the guidance around this is, what problem does the program seek to solve? It's the need or the problem that the program aims to address, and you can use the problem tree to help you figure that out. Once you've figured out what problem you're trying to solve, I think it's often helpful to go at the end of your theory of change and think about, okay, so this is the problem, and this is what we want to achieve at the end of the day, kind of your long-term goals. And these are the broader changes that we expect the program will contribute to, or the ultimate change that we really hope to be contributing to or influencing at the end of the day. So to figure out what your long-term goals are, you might ask things like, what big changes do we want to see in the future as a result of our work? You might consider long-term goal factors such as things that are big but reachable, so not too high pie in the sky. They should be ambitious. They need to inspire your team to strive for having a lot of impact, but you should really think about how that is a feasibility, something that can be real in the future so that you don't get discouraged. You should really use these to push your organization to stretch beyond its current capabilities. You need to make sure it's aligned with your mission, it matches up with your organization's core purpose, and that ultimately it helps if it is measurable so that these goals can be tracked with measurable indicators, so that we're going to talk about that later. They might be influenced by other factors as well that are outside your control, but you want to see if there's movement and if the needle is going in the right direction. A few things to think about when you're thinking about your listing your goals or your long-term goals is asking yourself the pace of change you might expect to see. So you're thinking, what is long-term? Are we talking 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? When do you expect to be able to see change moving in that direction? It can also be helpful to consider which goals are beyond the accountability line. You'll see here there's the hashed line on the left side of your goals. And so this is about what is outside your sphere of control and what is inside your sphere of control. On the inside, these are the direct linkages between your activities and what kind of outcomes that you're getting, that you're achieving. Whereas on the right side of the line, it's more what your changes that you're contributing to or that you're influencing, but many other factors are involved in influencing that long-term change as well. And it's important to think about where your line of accountability lies. And a few words here on accountability. So as an organization, you definitely will have a responsibility to your beneficiaries, your community, your donors, and yourself, right? And you need to use your resources effectively. And you need to be able to measure not only what resources you're deploying, but what kind of impact that they're having. So accountability in this context means making sure you're keeping track of this and you're monitoring this and that you're making sure that you're making progress towards your goal. So you're talking about monitoring, evaluation, and communication of what the progress is. But that accountability line in that theory of change, that hashed line, is really about trying to think clearly about where your program's direct impacts will lie and where they then start to mix in with effects from other things that are outside your program, outside of your control. So it's harder beyond that point to tell exactly how much change is due to your own program and how much might be caused by other factors that might be at play. So it's important to think about this and be clear about where that line might sit in your theory of change. Usually with monitoring, you will measure things that happen on the left of your theory of change. An evaluation, an external evaluation, usually measures the impact, the longer term impact, even on the outside of your line of accountability. So the next step, once you've gone about your, what are we trying to achieve? Let's go back to the beginning of the theory of change and think about, okay, now let's design our program or our innovation. What are the main components that need to be in place? What are the inputs and the activities we need to do that will eventually lead to that change, or at least contribute to that long-term change? So these are the actions that you can take to address the root causes of your problem. For those of you who have done the problem tree toolkit already, you'll understand what we mean by root causes. Okay, so these are the things that underlie your problem, and those become your activities. You have to think about the right level of detail. You're not going to list every single thing that you're doing in your program, but think about what are the core elements of your program or your innovation. What makes this your innovation distinct from other programs, other organizations? What are the list of 3 to 5 or so activities or buckets of things that you're doing that will lead to the change you're hoping to achieve? What makes your intervention distinct, basically? Now, it's important to think that your program will likely be multifaceted and have many different components that are related. So think in your theory of change about how you're using your arrows between the different boxes so that different activities might lead to different outcomes or outputs. And some activities might be connected to each other as well. So you can use your arrows to demonstrate this in your theory of change. Next step, step 4. So these are the mechanisms of change. We're getting into the core component here of your theory of change. This is about why we think our activities will lead to the change we have on the right side of our theory of change. So this is about asking the question, how do we think our activities will bring about the desired change? So when we say, if we say it as a sentence, we could say something like, by doing these things, these activities, in such a way that your mechanisms, they will lead to the following results, right? So it's the kind of characteristics of your activities in a way is what you're looking for in here. So what qualities do you need in your program to achieve the intended impact? So what is it about these activities that will enable change? If you're targeting changes in behavior, it's sometimes useful to think about what leads to behavior change. There's a link here to a report on the behavioral sciences and what we know about how behavior changes through changes in attitudes, changes in knowledge, and changes in kind of the environment or the opportunity to act. And so you might want to look at reports like that to give you some inspiration on some mechanisms. The next step. Now this is where impact starts, right? So these are the outputs. This is at the core of your theory of change. Now the outputs are the immediate results of your activities. These are the tangible things that you're starting to see. To identify your outputs, you'll ask questions like, what will we directly achieve by carrying out our activities? What's the immediate effect? The key word here is immediate. We're talking about things that relate directly to the recipients of your program. It could include things like, oh, teachers will have participated in our training, or teachers are starting to use our resources in the classroom, or we're starting to see a better understanding of key pedagogical concepts in our teachers following the training, those kinds of things. Teachers are starting to show a more positive attitude towards a new pedagogical approach, those kinds of things. Step 6, once you've looked at the immediate results, then you can move to the direct measurable results that are expected to be more in the short, medium, and sometimes even longer term. So you could have multiple columns here. You could have short-term outcomes, medium-term outcomes, long-term outcomes. It's depending on how detailed you need this to be. So these are the short, medium, and sometimes even longer term outcomes that happen as a result of your program. They are the stepping stone between your outputs and the long-term goals that we've already explored. They're often things like changes in knowledge, attitudes, behaviors, or conditions. You need to make sure that these are measurable, that you can have some metrics that you can monitor and track to see that they're going in the right direction. So the question you're asking is, what changes or benefits do we expect to see because of our work, directly because of our work? So some things to think about here is that some of your outcomes might be sequential, and you might have some outcomes leading to other outcomes. So that's where you might have short leading to medium term, for example. So putting arrows in certain ways in your theory of change can help illustrate how this might be working. The other thing you'll want to ask yourself is about pace of change here. So how quickly do we think we're going to see these changes in behavior, knowledge, attitudes, whatever it might be? And that might help you determine what's short term and what's medium term. So it might be that short term is after 3 months or 6 months, we're going to start seeing these things. And then in the medium term, maybe it's 6 months or 9 months or a year. And so it's helpful to think about that sequencing and the pace of change as well. Now, we've done all the components at the top. So the last component is right at the bottom, below the theory of change. And these are your critical factors. Now, the critical factors are really important to consider. They're kind of a little bit outside of your theory of change. Some people will refer to them as some assumptions as well. It's really thinking about what might enable or derail your whole program. The things that you assume will be in place or that you think will be in place that are in the wider system, for example, or there's enough funding, or that, schools would be open to participating in your program, or whatever it might be. These are your kind of assumption of what will enable. But you might also have these derailing factors, which are things like maybe there's going to be an election and a change of government that will completely change then the policies that will affect the kind of work that you can do and the kinds of programs you can give. Maybe there will be another pandemic that will shut all the schools, and then your program, which is normally set in schools, won't be able to run. So you might have these kinds of factors and the risks that you want to monitor and think about to make sure that you're aware of the things on the outside of your program that either need to be there to prop up your program and make sure everything runs, or that might derail them. Now, if you don't know what these are, then you're opening yourself up to potentially being affected by some of these factors, and they might take you by surprise. But if you identify them early and monitor them, you can respond to them and be more proactive and less reactive about them. So that was the last component of the program, of the toolkit on theory of change. I hope you found this helpful. I think what's important to remember is that once you've done the work behind your problem statement and here your theory of change, you're better positioned to enhance your strategy, especially in that desirability aspect of the DVF tool. So to gain a comprehensive perspective on your strategy, we recommend that you revisit your DVF assessment scores. And if you haven't taken the assessment yet, well, now's the perfect time. It really offers a holistic view, illustrating how tools like this one, the theory of change, align with your broader scaling objectives. Now, Global Schools Forum is with you in your journey to scale. And for additional strategy tools and inspiring case studies, visit the Scale Toolkit website. And I hope to see you on the journey.